That fateful winter, Kate had no idea that a slippery turn on a deserted road would mark the beginning of her darkest secret. And one careless turn of the wheel would bind her life to a stranger in a tragic and unbreakable knot. The winter sun had long since disappeared behind gray clouds, and the sharp wind was driving fine snow along the road. Kate sat behind the wheel of her car, trying to get off the country highway and reach the city before dusk. The evening promised to be cold, and the weather kept changing. One moment a light snowstorm, the next an eerie silence. However, the road was slippery, and visibility left much to be desired. Ever since Kate had learned to drive, she had always been extremely cautious and never rushed, especially in winter. But that day she needed to make it to an important meeting on time. Unforeseen circumstances had delayed her, and the approaching hurricane-force wind, along with the growing tension on the road, forced her to keep both hands ready at all times. She tried to focus on the road and not think about her personal troubles. Bank debts, complicated relationships with her parents, and a recent breakup with her boyfriend. All of it weighed heavily on her. How much farther? She muttered, glancing at the dark highway. I should stop at a gas station and get some coffee, Kate added louder, as if reassuring herself. She checked the rearview mirror, but there was only a swirling veil of snow. The chance to turn into a gas station had already passed. She had driven past it. There was nothing left to do but keep going. She tried to maintain a reasonable speed to avoid skidding on the ice. Suddenly, on a turn, the car swerved sharply. The tires betrayed her, sliding uncontrollably, and Kate knew that a crash was inevitable. A split second before impact, she saw the headlights of an oncoming car, and then everything happened in slow motion. The screech of brakes, a blinding flash of light, and a loud, dull thud. Kate didn't even have time to feel pain. Her consciousness faded. When she came to, paramedics were already working around her. Snowflakes fell onto her face, mixing with hot tears she hadn't even realized she was shedding. Someone was helping her out of the car, strong hands supporting her by the elbows, while a ringing sound echoed in her ears. Rescue workers and doctors were speaking constantly. Sirens sliced through the freezing air, and the smell of gasoline and burnt rubber lingered around her. Hang in there just a little longer, she heard a medic say. What happened? Kate's voice was hoarse and barely audible. She suspected that something terrible had occurred but stubbornly refused to look toward the other car. Each time she tried to lift her head and take in her surroundings, her hands started to tremble, and her heart clenched with an inexplicable, terrifying anxiety. She wanted to close her eyes and wake up in a different world. One where roads weren't slippery, and misfortune didn't lurk around every turn. A paramedic gently secured her onto a stretcher. Kate could barely suppress the rising wave of nausea and panic. Her strength was quickly leaving her, and her vision blurred. Through the noise and shouting, she still managed to catch a short phrase. The second victim isn't breathing. Those words pierced through her like a cold blade to the chest. She felt something shatter inside. A boundary between before and after. In that moment, she realized with dreadful clarity that someone had died in the accident, and perhaps it was her fault, even if just by unfortunate chance. The ambulance sped toward the nearest hospital, carrying Kate on a stretcher, plunging her into an unbearable sorrow. Darkness clouded her vision. A ringing sound filled her ears, and her heart ached with overwhelming fear and guilt, rushing at her like an avalanche, ready to bury any remnants of peace she had left. Pain and terror intertwined in her mind so intensely that she no longer felt her own body, and only the words "isn't breathing" echoed in every heartbeat. The gray twilight outside the hospital window gradually thickened, plunging the ward into a soft semi-darkness. Kate lay on the hard cot, staring at the ceiling. Several days had passed since the accident, but they had all merged into one long, agonizing moment for her. The dense silence and the intermittent sounds of 4 drips hovered on the edge of her consciousness. It felt as if the world around her had turned black and white, stripped of its warmth and colors. And 4 was inserted into Kate's arm, and her bandaged head throbbed unpleasantly. The doctors, however, had found no serious injuries. She had only suffered a concussion, a few cuts and bruises. But the real pain had taken root inside her. Every time Kate closed her eyes, The moment of impact flashed in her mind, bright light, the screech of metal, a scream, and then ominous silence. "You should try to sleep," came a quiet voice from behind the curtain. It was Emma, the girl from the neighboring ward, who had been in a different car accident around the same time as Kate. Her injuries were more severe, but she was recovering. A cautious connection had already formed between them. The strange bond of accident victims had brought them together, albeit loosely. Kate sighed and continued staring at the ceiling. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see those headlights, and I hear those words. Not breathing." Her voice trembled as she uttered that brief confession. Emma coughed lightly. "I understand. Try not to replay it in your mind. If you can't change anything, torturing yourself. It's impossible to forget," Kate interrupted, her tone on the verge of breaking. "One person died. And I'm alive. Why did it happen this way?" During her entire stay in the hospital, Kate had no visitors. Her parents lived in another state, and she had few friends left who would come to support her. Only nurses and doctors moved through the dimly lit corridors, asking brief questions about her condition before vanishing, leaving her alone with her nightmares. Evening fell. The ward was quiet. Only the distant hum of a television could be heard, along with the occasional cough of a patient nearby. Kate propped herself up on the pillow, staring at the sterile white walls, feeling a suffocating panic rise within her. Days of lying still had made her restless. She wanted, if not to escape, then at least to see something other than the ceiling and her blanket. Gathering her strength, Kate got out of bed. Her legs trembled, but she managed to keep her balance. Fastening her hospital robe, she stepped into the corridor. The lights seemed unnaturally bright, blindingly white. Voices echoed from a distance, along with measured footsteps and the clatter of dishes from the cafeteria. Leaning against the wall, she took a deep breath and moved forward. Every step sent pain through her joints, but she kept going. She needed to understand what had happened after the accident, to find out who had died, if their loved ones had the strength to bear the loss. Suppressing the lump in her throat, she made her way to the unit where the other accident victims were being treated. A long corridor led to a door labeled intensive care, but visitors were not allowed inside. Nearby, an elderly woman in a dark coat sat on a bench. Her face was exhausted, her sunken eyes staring blankly. Kate watched as a doctor approached the woman and spoke softly. "You should get some rest. It's possible no one will come today." "I'm very sorry." The woman wiped her eyes with a handkerchief, her shoulders trembling slightly. "No, I'll wait. Maybe his sister will arrive tomorrow," she whispered. "Oh, it's such a tragedy." The words "his sister" struck Kate like a knife. So the deceased had not been alone. He had family. Someone was grieving, searching for answers, perhaps blaming the entire world. Perhaps blaming her. Cold fear clenched Kate's heart, and she quietly stepped back to avoid being seen. She had no idea what she could say or how to explain. At the memory of what had happened, every nerve inside her tightened. Back in the relative safety of her bed, Kate ran trembling hands over her face and closed her eyes. But her thoughts would not relent. He had a sister, and I killed her brother. God, how do I live with this? That night she had the same nightmare. Headlights flashing, a sudden impact, and terrified eyes staring at her. But now a new image had appeared. A woman standing under the dim hospital corridor lights, looking at Kate with a mixture of grief and anger. In the morning, the doctor came to check on Kate. In the semi-darkness, everything seemed blurred, and Emma dozed quietly behind the curtain. "How are you feeling?" the doctor asked, flipping through her chart. "Physically more or less fine, but sleep not at all. That's a normal reaction to severe stress. We can prescribe mild sedatives to help ease the tension. But it's important to understand that the effects of an accident are not only physical, but also psychological. You may need therapy." Kate nodded weakly and looked out the window, where the pale winter light shimmered. She didn't want to discuss her inner turmoil with a stranger, and even admitting it to herself was frightening. But the doctor's words lingered in her mind. After he left, she lay there for a long time, staring at the window and replaying the same question in her mind. How could she go on living with the guilt that had settled deep in her soul? She knew she couldn't simply move on from what had happened. The guilt was growing like a dark shadow, consuming her entire being. I need to find out who he was, Kate thought, clenching her fists under the blanket. I need to find his family and somehow help. I can't keep hiding. For now, all she could do was watch helplessly as her life changed forever. Morning once again found Kate in the hospital ward. Bright winter light poured through the large corridor windows, reflecting off the glass and dazzlingly sparkling on the pristine white floor tiles. Kate had spent another sleepless night, and as she got out of bed, she felt pain aching through her entire body. In her dreams, the sounds of the accident and the screams of people she had never even seen that fateful night continued to haunt her. But along with the pain and guilt, a firm decision was forming within her, to find the family of the deceased at any cost, to learn the truth about him, and to offer even the faintest hope that she could help them endure their grief. The doctor had allowed Kate to take short walks around the ward, and she took advantage of this to distract herself from her overwhelming thoughts. The corridor was buzzing with morning activity. Patients lined up for procedures, orderlies hurried past with carts, and nurses in blue uniforms were doing their rounds. Kate walked along the wall, trying not to attract attention. Emma stood by the window, her thin frame tense. She clutched a small music player and headphones to her chest. Seeing Kate, Emma gave a faint smile. "Hey, how are you?" she asked with a note of sympathy in her voice. "Hey." Kate closed her eyes for a second, trying to gather her thoughts. "Trying not to lose my mind. I want to know. Have you heard anything about the person who died in that accident?" Emma's lips trembled for a moment, and she shook her head. "I haven't. And they don't really let anyone into the ICU. The doctors are tight-lipped, won't say anything beyond general phrases. But I've heard that some woman keeps coming to the ward, waiting there for hours. Maybe she's his mother, or his wife, or his sister," Kate whispered, lowering her gaze to the floor. "I heard he had a sister." She sighed, feeling desperation rise inside her, and turned toward the window. Outside, the hospital courtyard lay under a thin layer of snow, and a woman in a dark puffer jacket walked slowly through it. Kate squinted and recognized something familiar in her posture. Perhaps this was the same elderly woman she had seen a few days ago. "I can't keep hiding," Kate said. "I want to meet her." "But..." She trailed off, unsure how to finish her thought. Emma gently touched her elbow. "If you've decided, then do it. Living with a terrible secret is no way to live. But please be prepared that she might blame you. Just try to understand her pain." Kate let out a bitter chuckle, but determination shone in her eyes. "I know. That's how it should be. I have to face it sooner or later." Later that morning, when the usual hospital rounds had settled down, Kate gathered the courage to leave the ward and take the elevator down to the hospital lobby. Visitors crowded near the coat check. Conversations hummed. Someone was crying, and someone else was loudly thanking a doctor who had just come out of an office. Kate scanned the area for a familiar face and suddenly spotted a slender dark-haired woman in her 30s sitting on a low couch, legs tucked beneath her, anxiously twisting a handkerchief in her hands. Her expression revealed deep sorrow. She had clearly endured something terrible and had yet to find peace. As if propelled by an unseen force, Kate began moving toward her. But her head buzzed and fear made her knees weak. What would she say? How would she introduce herself? "Hello, I'm the one who killed your brother." The thought alone sent shivers through her. What if this woman has nothing to do with that accident at all? Doubt flashed in her mind. But her heart pounded insistently. "It's her. You know it." Taking a deep breath, Kate approached. The woman lifted her tear-streaked eyes to her, revealing immense exhaustion. "Excuse me." Kate's voice was quiet and uncertain. Are you the sister of the person who, after the accident?" The woman stared at her in confusion for a moment, then nodded. "Yes. My name is Amanda. And did you know him?" she asked, trying to compose herself. The name echoed in Kate's mind like a shockwave. "Amanda," she repeated silently, her heart pounding. She couldn't say she had truly known the man who had died. After all, their first and only encounter had been a tragic, fatal one. Yet somehow she felt that she owed it to him, to understand and grieve alongside those who mourned him. I'm sorry I'm being treated in the same ward," Kate murmured, trying to hide her nervousness. "I heard about your loss. I'm so sorry." Amanda sniffled and bit her lip. "Thank you. It feels like no one can truly understand what I'm going through. I flew here from another city just to be close. But..." She looked away, a tear sliding down her cheek. "My brother died on the spot. The doctors said they tried to resuscitate him, but it was no use." Kate felt tears burning in her eyes. She wanted to rush forward to embrace Amanda, to beg for forgiveness. Not just for herself but for fate, for that cursed road. But she couldn't yet say those words of confession. Not now. Trust was too fragile, and her guilt too immense. I was in an accident around the same time," Kate said quietly, clenching her fingers together. "When I heard that someone had died, my heart clenched. I can't even begin to imagine how painful this must be for your family." Amanda lifted her head slightly, something resembling gratitude flickering in her eyes. "Thank you for caring. I haven't really talked to anyone here. It all feels so unreal, like a nightmare I can't wake up from." For a moment silence stretched between them, filled with pain, yet also with the first stirrings of understanding. Kate knew that this was the first step, meeting the sister of the deceased. But revealing the full truth now felt impossible. "I can't just blurt it out in the middle of a hospital lobby," her thoughts screamed. "If you ever need to talk," Kate said, trying to keep her voice steady, "or just let it all out, I'm here to listen. My name is Kate, by the way." Amanda gave a nervous nod. "Thank you, Kate. I don't know if I can talk about this without crying, but I really do need some support." They exchanged phone numbers. Amanda, seemingly surprised by Kate's kindness, recited her contact details almost automatically. Kate, meanwhile, knew she was stepping deeper into her deception, yet she hoped that somehow this path would lead to redemption. If she could ever summon the courage to tell the truth. "I think I'll go get some fresh air," Amanda said, carefully standing up and brushing her hair back. "Thank you for reaching out." Kate exhaled heavily, stepping aside to let her pass. "Take care, Amanda. And reach out if you need anything." She watched as Amanda disappeared down the corridor, torn between relief at having met her and the crushing guilt of hiding the truth. Kate sat down on the same couch Amanda had just left, staring at the phone, now holding the number of the sister of the man she had killed. "I can't back down now," Kate told herself. "I have to help her, even if it's just a little. But how do I explain that I am the very reason for her pain?" Kate woke up in the middle of the night from yet another nightmare. The accident, the hospital corridors, the piercing screech of brakes. She struggled to sit up in bed, trying to calm her trembling and rapid heartbeat. The ward was dimly lit, and she realized she wouldn't be able to fall asleep again. Throwing on a sweater, she quietly stepped out of the ward. The corridor windows reflected the flickering glow of streetlights, and a damp chill drifted in from outside. Down in the hospital courtyard, she noticed a familiar silhouette. Amanda, clad in a dark coat, clutching a handkerchief tightly to her face. Should I tell her the truth right now? Kate wondered for a moment, but cold fear paralyzed her. She imagined Amanda's grief and rage if she learned that it was Kate who had been behind the wheel. By morning, Kate had gathered her resolve and invited Amanda to a small cafe on the hospital's ground floor. Under the dim glow of the lamps, they sat at a table. Amanda absent-mindedly held a cup of coffee, barely taking a sip. "How are you today?" Kate asked softly, trying not to betray her nervousness. "I've lost track of time. Every day feels like a copy of the last," Amanda replied, her gaze drifting tiredly across the walls. She spoke about how she had come to collect her brother Ryan's belongings and handle the paperwork. It was difficult for her to stay in the hospital where he had died, but she couldn't bring herself to leave just yet. Kate listened, feeling the guilt within her growing stronger. "Tell me about Ryan," Kate finally said. Amanda looked at her with a sad smile. "He was kind. He couldn't ignore someone in need. He worked for a charity and dreamed of creating a volunteer program. He loved making the world a better place." Each word about Ryan's kindness struck Kate with sharp pain. She realized that it was precisely this kind of person whom the world had lost because of that fatal turn. I don't know what to do with his plans now. Amanda tightened her grip around her cup, her hands trembling. It terrifies me to think that he's gone. Kate wanted to confess everything, to tell Amanda that she had been the driver that night, but the words wouldn't come. She was afraid of destroying the fragile trust that had just begun to form. Instead, she quietly suggested, "Maybe you could continue his work? I'd be willing to help if you need it." Amanda looked up in surprise. "But you didn't even know him. Why would you want to help?" "It's hard to explain. People like Ryan shouldn't disappear without leaving a mark." A brief silence settled between them. Somewhere nearby, the faint clinking of cups echoed as cafe staff cleared tables. Amanda ran a hand through her hair, trying to steady herself. "Maybe that's a way to keep his light alive. At least I could try." Suddenly she stood up. "I'm sorry, I can't talk about this anymore. I need to be alone." Kate nodded, watching her go. Inside her, relief from learning about Ryan warred with the burning guilt of keeping the truth hidden. She sat at the empty table for a long time, her mind racing with one relentless thought. This man could have saved dozens more lives. How do I live, knowing that it was me who took his away? She still had no answers, but Kate knew one thing. Meeting Amanda was just the beginning of a long journey toward redemption. And perhaps, the only way to compensate, if even slightly, for the pain she had caused was to help Amanda fulfill her brother's dream. Even if it meant that one day, she would have to reveal the entire truth and face whatever consequences awaited her. Amanda had not appeared for several days. Kate tried not to panic, convincing herself that Ryan's sister needed time to process her grief. But the silence weighed heavily on her, as if it carried the threat of exposure. What if someone had told Amanda more details about the accident? What if she had figured out that it was Kate who had been behind the wheel that night? One morning, just as Kate had nearly given up hope and resigned herself to the thought that Amanda simply no longer wanted to see her, her phone vibrated. The message hit her nerves like a shock. "Hi, Kate. Sorry for not writing. I didn't have the strength to talk to anyone. I'll be at the hospital tomorrow afternoon to pick up some documents. Can we meet?" "Amanda." Kate's heart plummeted. On one hand, she was relieved that Amanda hadn't cut off contact. On the other, a wave of panic surged inside her. What if she found out everything? What if she met someone who saw me that night? Kate tormented herself with thoughts while staring at the screen. Still, she quickly typed a response. "Of course. Come whenever you're ready. I'll be waiting in the cafeteria on the ground floor." The next day, anxiety clenched Kate's chest as she sat in the hospital cafe waiting. When Amanda walked in, Kate immediately noticed how exhausted she looked. Dark circles under her eyes, lips pressed tightly together. "Hi," Amanda said softly, sinking into a chair. "How are you?" "Getting by," Kate replied. "How about you?" Amanda sighed. "I had to deal with a lot regarding Ryan's funeral. I barely have any strength left. And I found out some things about the accident." Kate's heart tightened. Panic flared again, but Amanda spoke vaguely. "There was high speed and ice on the road. Ryan was gone instantly, and I don't know who was driving the other car." "I'm sorry," Kate exhaled, feeling the burning weight of shame. I'm so sorry." Amanda nodded, her fingers intertwined tightly. For a moment their eyes met, and Kate saw the storm of pain within her. She wanted to confess, but fear held her back. "Sometimes I want to find the person responsible, to scream at them. But I don't even know who was behind the wheel," Amanda sighed. "All I've heard is that there was a bad skid. No one has mentioned any names." These words felt like a death sentence to Kate. She realized her secret was still safe. But knowing that Amanda was desperately searching for someone to blame stabbed her heart like a burning blade. Amanda continued, more restrained now. "Honestly, sometimes I think it's better not to know. If I met the person responsible, I'm afraid of how angry I'd be. But then what? It won't bring Ryan back." Kate shut her eyes, her breathing heavy. Amanda's words hit her with terrifying force. "If she finds out the truth, she will hate me forever," Kate thought. Still, she wanted to help Amanda, to be there for her. Maybe supporting her and working on Ryan's projects together would ease some of the pain they both carried. A heavy silence followed, and Kate, desperate to change the subject, asked about Ryan's plans. "You mentioned he had notes for a volunteer project?" "Yes, I still have his documents. I want to continue his work, so he won't just disappear without a trace." Amanda looked slightly more alive as she spoke about her brother, and Kate felt another stab of guilt. She, the one who took Ryan from the world, was now offering to help with his legacy. But maybe this was the only path to redemption. "I'd love to look at the materials," Kate offered. "The two of us could figure things out faster." "All right, I'll send them over. And thank you for keeping me from shutting down completely." With those words, Amanda stood up. "Thanks for listening. I can't talk more right now. If you need to ask anything, just text me." Left alone in the empty cafe, Kate watched her leave. It felt as if the walls were closing in, the fear of being exposed, the guilt of what she had done, and yet there was also a strange glimmer of hope. Perhaps through working on Ryan's dream, she could make amends in some way. She will have to know the truth eventually, Kate thought. But maybe by then we'll be close enough that she might understand me, just a little. Kate spent her days in the hospital, rereading the files Amanda had sent her. Ryan's notes on the volunteer project. Every detail reflected how genuine and proactive he had been. Assisting the elderly, supporting animal shelters, creating an online platform for volunteers. Kate's heart clenched as she realized how much this man had wanted to make the world a better place. And yet she, though unintentionally, had taken his life. One day, Emma visited her, cautiously leaning on her crutches. She studied Kate's face carefully. "How's it going with Amanda?" "It's difficult," Kate admitted. "I'm afraid to tell her everything, but living with this lie is unbearable." Emma sighed heavily. "You'll have to find the right moment for the truth. The longer you hide it, the worse her reaction will be when she finds out." Kate knew this, but she still hoped that if she could help bring Ryan's ideas to life, Amanda might soften enough to hear her out. After Emma left, Kate messaged Ryan's sister, suggesting they meet to discuss project details. Amanda remained silent for several days, and Kate started to worry that she had cut off contact. One day, in the hospital lobby, Kate noticed an unfamiliar man in a suit asking a nurse where to find Kate Walker. A chill ran through her. Maybe he's from the insurance company, or someone investigating the accident? The thought sent her heart racing. She quickly ducked behind a column, watching as the man hurried toward the elevator. The truth could come out at any moment, Kate thought, struggling to steady her pounding heart. "I have to talk to Amanda myself before she hears it from someone else." That evening, Kate finally received a short message from Amanda. "Sorry, I was swamped today. I'll be at the hospital tomorrow. I'll call you." Kate's chest tightened. She was facing a conversation where they wouldn't just discuss Ryan's project, but possibly her own confession. The lie suffocated her, but the need for redemption was stronger than her fear. She lay down, tension gripping every inch of her body. "If I don't find the courage to tell the truth, our friendship will be built on deception," she thought, staring at Ryan's notes on the screen. But what if Amanda can never forgive me? She had no answer. All she could do was focus on taking a step toward bringing Ryan's dream to life. For Kate, it had become the only thread keeping her guilt at bay and offering the smallest hope that, when the truth finally surfaced, Amanda would be willing to listen to her remorse. Kate spent the night on edge. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Amanda and the inevitable question loomed. Should she confess now? In the morning, she made her way to the visitors' lounge on the first floor, where they usually met. The small room, furnished with a couple of chairs and a worn-out magazine shelf, felt gloomy under the pale winter light streaming through the window. A few minutes later, Amanda walked in. Dark shadows under her eyes hinted at exhaustion, but her posture was firm. She clutched a thin folder in her hands. "Hey," she said, sitting across from Kate. "Sorry if I kept you waiting. I had to finalize the paperwork for Ryan's transportation." Kate swallowed the lump in her throat. "It's okay, I'm just glad you could make it. I wanted to show you some ideas I had for Ryan's project." Amanda nodded, tilting her head slightly to hide a forming tear. Thank you. His dreams and plans, they're all I have left. Kate spread out a notebook on the table, displaying notes on developing the online platform, organizing volunteers, and collaborating with charities. She tried to speak steadily, but inside, guilt and fear twisted her insides. Amanda, however, asked questions with growing confidence, a flicker of determination flashing in her eyes. Ryan wanted to involve programmers, Kate explained. I know someone who could help build the website. That's great. Ryan had contacts at shelters and social institutions, Amanda replied. I'll have to sort through all of it, but I don't know much about IT. For a brief moment their eyes met and Kate felt a wave of bitterness. The closer their collaboration became, the more her fear of being exposed grew. Amanda, she started almost unconsciously. I wanted to tell you. Amanda's expression tensed, but Kate lost her nerve. She abruptly changed course, standing up mid-sentence. I can help with emails and presentations if you need. Amanda exhaled softly, as if bracing for bad news, but upon hearing the harmless offer, she relaxed. Thank you. I do need support. A phone vibrated and Amanda glanced at the screen, her brows knitting together. Sorry, it's an important call. I have to take this. She stepped out, leaving Kate staring after her, suffocating under the weight of her unspoken confession. But the fear of Amanda turning away from her forever was paralyzing. Just then, a man in a suit appeared near the door, the same man Kate had seen in the hospital lobby before. He stopped, studying her face. Miss Walker? I'm Brian Jones, investigating the accident. Can we talk? Kate's heart stopped for a moment. She realized that the truth had found her, and there was no hiding anymore. Yes, of course, she whispered, panic rising in her chest. This was the moment Kate had dreaded all week. Now the truth was knocking at the door, and there was no escape. Kate stood in the middle of the small visitor's room, feeling her heart pound violently. Brian Jones, the investigator handling the accident case, watched her, waiting for a response. The partially open door revealed glimpses of the corridor, where doctors and nurses moved about. Each second dragged on painfully. Let's sit down, Brian finally suggested, gesturing toward the empty chairs. Kate obediently lowered herself onto a chair. Her hands clenched tightly together. Thoughts raced through her mind. If Amanda walks in right now, what will I say? How do I explain that I was the one driving that night? But there was no way out. The truth had already come knocking. I've reviewed the footage from the highway camera, Brian began in an even tone. You weren't speeding, though the conditions were treacherous. Black ice, poor visibility. Your braking distance was too long on the ice. But you were behind the wheel of the car that collided with Mr. Ryan Miller's vehicle. Saying the victim's name, Brian lifted his eyes to Kate, watching her reaction. I understand you were caught in unfortunate circumstances, but I need your official statement about what happened. Kate felt nausea rise in her throat. She took a deep breath. I already told the police what happened. My car skidded on the ice. I tried to regain control, but I couldn't. My speed wasn't high, and I wasn't under the influence of anything. But everything happened too fast. Her voice trembled. Along with flashes of the tragic impact, Amanda's face surfaced in her mind. As if summoned by her thoughts, the door creaked open, and Kate heard the painfully familiar voice. Kate, who is this? Are you okay? It was Amanda. She entered, still holding her phone to her ear, but upon noticing the tense atmosphere, she ended the call. Brian rose slightly from his chair. Excuse me, miss, this is an official conversation. Wait, Amanda said cautiously, glancing between them. What is this about? Kate froze internally. The words stuck in her throat. But Brian answered clearly and without hesitation. I'm investigating the accident that took Ryan Miller's life. Miss Walker was the driver of the second vehicle. Silence fell over the room like a heavy shroud. Amanda slowly closed the door behind her and remained standing, as if paralyzed. She looked at Kate, her eyes filled with disbelief. Kate, what does this mean? Tears streamed down Kate's face. The world seemed to shrink. leaving her alone with Amanda's pain and her own overwhelming guilt. She stood up, taking an uncertain step forward. "I'm sorry," she whispered so softly that Amanda barely heard. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd hate me. But it was my car. I was driving when it happened." Amanda's face twisted in pain, shock flashing in her eyes. "You this whole time? From the beginning? How could you?" Her voice cracked into a desperate, ringing cry. She staggered backward, nearly dropping the folder of documents about Ryan. Brian felt the need to intervene. "Miss Miller, based on eyewitness reports and forensic analysis, the accident was caused by the weather conditions. There was no reckless driving, no intoxication." But Amanda wasn't listening. She stared at Kate, shaking from the flood of emotions. Her brother had died in that horrific accident, and the person who had stood by her, promising to help continue Ryan's work, had been hiding her own involvement all along. "You knew what I was going through." Amanda's voice was raw with anguish. "And you lied, pretended to be my friend?" Kate struggled to breathe. "I never wanted to lie. I was terrified of losing you. I know how awful this sounds. I regret it every day. I wanted to help you fulfill Ryan's dream, to make things right somehow." Amanda stepped back, her expression a mixture of rage, devastation, and deep betrayal. "What do you care about his dream? You took his life. Why would you care about his volunteer project? To ease your guilt?" Kate lowered her gaze, tears dripping onto her hands. "Maybe. But Amanda, I swear, I truly want to help. I know I can't bring him back, but please let me at least try." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Some hospital staff glanced in, drawn by the raised voices. Brian gently closed the door. "Miss Miller, I understand this is difficult to hear. But legally, Miss Walker is not at fault. The case file is nearly complete." Amanda stared at Kate. "You may not be guilty in the eyes of the law, but to me, you are responsible for my brother's death." With that, she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Kate stood frozen, the weight of those words pressing down on her like a crushing force. Brian's statement about the case closure rang in her ears like the final nail in the coffin of her hopes for forgiveness. It's over, Kate thought. She had just lost the fragile connection they had built, and she had no idea if there was any path back. 2 months passed. Kate was discharged from the hospital and quietly settled into a small rental apartment on the outskirts of town. Her physical wounds had nearly healed, but the ones inside ached even more. She had sent Amanda a couple of messages, but there had been no reply. Every day she sat at her computer, continuing Ryan's project, gathering contacts, emailing developers, reaching out to volunteers. It was the only thing that made her feel as though life hadn't completely stopped the moment of the crash. But Amanda's face in that moment of revelation haunted her. Kate still hoped that, with time, the pain would dull just enough for Amanda to hear her out. Some nights she cried, imagining a future where they worked together on the project, keeping Ryan's vision alive, not just through his loss but through his dreams. One evening her phone buzzed with a short message. "Thank you for working on his project. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, but I appreciate that you're trying. Amanda." Kate reread the words, feeling a fragile thread of hope rising within her. Every action has consequences, and eventually one must face them. The road to true redemption lies in honesty, empathy, and the willingness to bear another's pain. Even in the darkest tragedies, there can be a chance for forgiveness and transformation, if one has the courage to take responsibility for their actions. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button so you don't miss more heartwarming stories.